I was asked by a friend at work to turn a few smokestacks for his train layout, so I thought I'd make a little video showing how I do it. This is the first one. Right now what I'm doing is roughing out the cylinder using a roughing gouge just to get it down to the general dimensions. As you can see, it's a taper down towards the headstock end of the lathe. And in a few minutes I'll show the detail of the top of the stack. Just going to smooth out the taper a little bit, get it roughed out. You can see a little bit of wobble near the tailstock. I'm not worried about that because that's all going to get turned out anyway, so that wobble will go away as I turn down the diameter a little bit. And finishing out the taper now. The goal is to get a nice straight taper. I'm not sure if I achieved that or not. There might be a little bit of a curve to the sides, but yeah, that's okay. I can live with a slight imperfection, and I think my customer can too. Now it's time to work on the top of the smokestack. Here's how I'm doing this. I had an exemplar smokestack to work with. It was a commercially made plastic one, and what I did was line up the existing stack against the turning blank, and you'll see that plastic one in just a minute when I'm checking some of the measurements. And I just drew a couple of lines marking where the change in direction was at the top of the stack. You see that there's a little bulge at the top that I'm working on right now. Just turning that down, getting it kind of roughed down to where I can work with it and fine-tune the angles a little bit. Starting to look pretty close. I'm using my 1/2-inch skew chisel for this. Mainly, well, for one reason, because it's very sharp right now. Sharpened it on a diamond stone not too long ago, and I know that it'll do the job and leave a very smooth surface. But it's also cut at just the right angle for me to make those little ramps at the top of this smokestack, and it fits in just right. Flip it over and use it the other way. That little bulge, tidy that up a little bit, and hey, we're almost done. Sanding is a very dusty operation, so I've got the shop vac going. You can see the end of the hose right there, hoping to collect most of the sawdust that comes off the piece as I sand it. I like to start with 80 grit. That helps knock down some of the roughies on the spindle. Gets it down to a basic smoothness level where I can put my hand on it and not feel a whole lot of roughness. After the 80 grit, I like to move on to 100 grit. Next comes 220. I used to sand all my projects up to 220. Now, typically 320 is the minimum. Sometimes I'll go up to 500 or even 1,000. And now we're up to 320. This is probably as far down as I'm going to sand it. This piece is going to be painted anyway and textured with a brick looking texture, so absolute smoothness just isn't that necessary. After sanding to 320, I'm going to take a paper towel and get rid of some of the leftover sawdust, just to make it a little bit cleaner and easier to work with. Never use a piece of cloth to do this. Always use paper towel. Okay, now I'm going to take the original smokestack and set it alongside the new one, just to see how close we are. I'm not real happy with the angles right here at the top of the stack. They're not quite a match, so I'm going to touch that up a little bit with a skew chisel. Just cleaning up those angles just a little bit, making the edges a little bit sharper, make it look a little bit more like the original. Let's check it again. Much better. I'm a lot happier with that. Well, now it's time to finish the top, and I was going to saw off that little flange, but I decided instead to put it back on the lathe and see if I could turn it off. So what I've done is I've turned the blank around, so now the base of the stack is in the headstock, in the chuck, and the top of it is against my tailstock, my live center. So I'm using my parting tool to turn off the top waste piece as much as I can. I'll turn it down to just a little nub there, and then I'm going to have to find a way to get rid of that nub. Now my initial thought is to try to hold on to the piece and steady it with my hand as I'm turning off that last little nub. Let's see how well that works out for me. Okay, fairly steady so far. But yeah, it's kind of hard to really hold it steady enough to really turn off that little spigot. It's not quite going to work out, so I think I'm going to have to resort to a fine-tooth saw. But I'm stubborn. I'm going to keep trying. Oop, didn't work out at all. So I wound up sawing off that last little spigot, and then I put the top of the stack on a belt sander. That probably wasn't a great idea. I probably should have sanded that off by hand because the belt sander was a little bit too aggressive. But this is the new stack standing next to the plastic one. My friend told me not to worry about that little housing at the bottom of it. He was going to probably make that himself. So I think we're looking good.